The crystalline amphitheater of the Galactic Institute of Statistical Analysis hummed with the quiet intensity of pure mathematics. Holographic equations floated through the air like frozen fireworks, their elegant curves describing the fundamental probabilities that govern the universe. At the center of it all, Professor Zixanth of the Calculation Collective stood before an assembly of the galaxy's most brilliant minds, his four-dimensional form shifting through spectrums of light as he presented his latest research. Esteemed colleagues, Zixanth began, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple mathematical dimensions. We are gathered today to examine what can only be described as the most perplexing statistical anomaly in recorded galactic history. The assembled beings representatives from civilizations that had mastered quantum probability, dimensional mathematics, and predictive modeling leaned forward with interest. The Calculation Collective was renowned for their ability to predict any outcome through pure mathematical analysis. If they were admitting to a statistical anomaly, it must be extraordinary. Observe, Zixanth continued, activating a massive holographic display that showed the recent military engagements of the past stellar cycle. The species known as Homo sapiens, originating from the planet Earth and the Sol system, have achieved victory in 47 separate military engagements over the past year. That hardly seems anomalous, interrupted Dr. Velkaran of the Probability Institute, her crystalline form refracting the display's light into prismatic patterns. Many species achieve consistent military success through superior technology or tactics. Ah, Zixanth's form brightened with what might have been amusement, but observe the statistical probability of each individual victory. The display shifted, showing detailed analysis of human military engagements. Numbers that should have been impossible floated in the air, probability calculations that defied mathematical logic. The Battle of Kepler Station, Zixanth explained, highlighting one engagement. Human forces faced an enemy with superior numbers, advanced technology, and strategic positioning. Mathematical analysis indicated a 0.03% probability of human victory, yet they won decisively. A statistical outlier, suggested Commander Thexmol of the Strategic Prediction Corps. Unusual, but not impossible. The Battle of Europa, Zixanth continued. 0.07% probability of victory. The humans won. The Siege of Titan. 0.02% probability. Victory. The Proxima engagement. 0.01% probability. Victory. His form shifted through increasingly agitated color spectrums. 47 engagements. 47 statistically impossible victories. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Individual unlikely victories could be dismissed as outliers, but a pattern of impossible outcomes suggested something far more significant. What's the cumulative probability of this sequence of victories? Asked Dr. Velkaran, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer would be disturbing. Approximately 1.7 times 10 to 347, Zixanth replied. To put that in perspective, the probability of randomly assembling a functional starship by throwing metal parts into space is approximately y-40. The humans have achieved something mathematically impossible. Then how do you explain it? Demanded Professor Klicksvan of the Certainty Institute. The universe operates according to mathematical principles. Probability is absolute. These results cannot exist. Zixanth's form dimmed with what could only be described as intellectual embarrassment. After extensive analysis, I can only conclude that the humans possess what they term luck, a primitive concept that suggests favorable outcomes occur through random chance rather than logical causation. The phrase sent ripples of disbelief through the assembly. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had long, since abandon such superstitious concepts in favor of mathematical certainty. Luck, repeated Dr. Valkaran, her crystalline structure resonating with what might have been contempt. You're suggesting that a primitive species is achieving impossible victories through ... coincidence? I can find no other explanation, Zixanth admitted. Their tactical approaches are crude, their technology primitive, their strategic planning chaotic. Yet they consistently achieve outcomes that our most sophisticated probability models indicate should be impossible. Commander Thexmel's form shifted into patterns indicating deep skepticism. Perhaps their methods are more sophisticated than we realize. Perhaps they possess probability manipulation technology that we haven't detected. I considered that possibility, Zixanth replied, bringing up detailed scans of human military equipment. Their technology is centuries behind galactic standards. They use chemical explosives instead of quantum disruptors. They employ kinetic projectiles instead of energy weapons. They communicate through electromagnetic radiation instead of quantum entanglement. Their most advanced AI systems are barely capable of basic pattern recognition. Then you're suggesting, said Dr. Valkaran slowly, that primitive beings using obsolete technology are achieving impossible victories through pure chance? I'm suggesting, Zixanth corrected, that the universe appears to favor them in ways that violate fundamental mathematical principles. The humans call it luck, and they seem to accept it as a natural phenomenon rather than an impossibility. The debate that followed was intense and troubling. The galaxy's most brilliant mathematical minds struggled to reconcile human, military success with their understanding of probability and causation. The idea that random chance could produce such consistently favorable outcomes challenged the very foundations of their scientific worldview. There must be a logical explanation, insisted Professor Klicksvan. The universe operates according to mathematical laws. Probability distributions are absolute. Random chance cannot produce such skewed results. And yet, Zixanth replied, his form flickering with frustrated confusion, the data is undeniable. The humans achieve impossible victories with such regularity that impossible may no longer be an appropriate term. So what do we do about it? Asked Dr. Valkaran. Do we study this phenomenon? Do we attempt to replicate it? Do we simply dismiss human success as an unexplained anomaly? We observe, decided Commander Thexmol. We analyze. We attempt to understand how primitive beings can achieve outcomes that advanced mathematics indicates should be impossible. And perhaps ... perhaps we learn from them. The very suggestion was radical. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations learning from primitive humans who relied on luck rather than calculation? It challenged every assumption about progress, sophistication, and the nature of success itself, but the data was undeniable. The humans were achieving the impossible with disturbing regularity. And if the galaxy's mathematical models couldn't explain or predict human success, perhaps it was time to consider that their models were incomplete. 3 sectors away from the Galactic Institute, Captain Sarah Lucky Mitchell stood in the cramped briefing room of the human destroyer Persistence, studying tactical displays that painted a picture of overwhelming disadvantage. At 34, she had earned her nickname through a series of victories that had left her superiors scratching their heads and her enemies convinced that the universe itself was conspiring against them. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander James Park approached, his expression grim, latest intelligence from the reconnaissance drones. The hegemony has positioned 17 heavy cruisers around the mining station. Our tactical analysis indicates, let me guess, Sarah interrupted, not looking up from her display. Impossible odds, minimal chance of success, recommendation to abort the mission? Actually, ma'am, the analysis indicates a 0.02% probability of successful mission completion. The tactical computer recommends immediate withdrawal. Sarah smiled grimly. 0.02%? That's actually pretty good for us. Remember the Titan engagement? We had 0.01% odds and still pulled it off. Ma'am, with respect, that was incredibly lucky. The enemy's main weapon system failed at exactly the right moment. The asteroid field shifted to provide cover, and their commander made a tactical error that we were ready to exploit, Sarah finished. Lieutenant Commander, how long have you served with me? 18 months, ma'am. And in that time, how many lucky breaks have you witnessed? Park considered the question. Dozens, ma'am. Equipment failures at crucial moments, environmental conditions shifting in our favor, enemy mistakes that created opportunities, double cuts, and how many of those breaks were we prepared to exploit? All of them, ma'am. But surely you can't expect. I can't expect luck, Sarah agreed, but I can prepare for it. Show me the detailed mission parameters. As Park activated the holographic display, Sarah began her usual pre-mission ritual, a process that had mystified observers and earned her reputation as the luckiest officer in the human fleet. She studied not just the primary mission objectives, but every possible variable that could affect the outcome. Environmental factors, she muttered, pulling up local stellar data. Solar flare activity in the next 6 hours. Electromagnetic. Interference possibilities. Gravitational anomalies from the nearby gas giant. Ma'am, Park ventured, these factors are largely unpredictable. We can't base our tactical planning on random environmental events. Can't we? Sarah switched to another display showing the mining station's infrastructure, power grid vulnerabilities, structural weak points, emergency protocol procedures. What happens if their main power conduit fails? Emergency backup. Systems would activate, but there would be a 17-second delay in 17 seconds. Sarah nodded. Plenty of time to exploit if we're positioned correctly. What about their communication array? It's hardened against standard electronic warfare, but it relies on quantum entanglement transmitters that are sensitive to gravitational fluctuations from the gas giant, Sarah finished, which occur every 43 minutes due to tidal forces. If their communication goes down during the precise moment we need it to. Park stared at her. Ma'am, you're not suggesting we can time our attack to coincide with random gravitational events? I'm suggesting we can be ready when those events occur. What's the maximum range of the sensor grid? Approximately 50,000 kilometers. But it has blind spots created by the asteroid field's mineral composition. If we approach from Vector 77 Mark IV during the 12-minute window when the asteroid shadows create a sensor dead zone. As Sarah continued her analysis, Park began to understand what separated human tactical thinking from the rest of the galaxy. Other species planned for optimal conditions and expected them to occur. Humans planned for chaos and positioned themselves to benefit when it inevitably happened. Ma'am, he said slowly, you're not relying on luck. You're preparing for every possible advantage that could occur. Exactly, Sarah replied. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. The universe doesn't favor anyone, but it provides opportunities to those who are ready to recognize and exploit them. She turned to address the assembled crew. Listen up, people. The tactical computer says we have a 0.02% chance of success. I say we have a 100% chance of being ready when the universe hands us our opportunities. The crew, veterans of Sarah's impossible victories, nodded with understanding. They had learned that their captain's luck was actually the result of obsessive preparation for every conceivable contingency. Chief Rodriguez, Sarah called to her engineering officer, I need redundant backup systems for all critical ship functions. When their defense grid fails, and it will fail, I want us ready to exploit the opening. Aye, ma'am. Setting up triple redundancy on all systems. Lieutenant Kim, I want sensor probes positioned to monitor every environmental variable in the variable. And Lieutenant Kim, I want sensor probes positioned to monitor every environmental variable in Lieutenant Kim. System: solar activity, gravitational fluctuations, electromagnetic fields. When conditions align in our favor, I want to know about it before it happens. Already deploying probe network, Captain. Commander Park, coordinate with tactical. I want attack vectors planned for 17 different scenarios, each one based on a different lucky break that might occur. As the crew sprang into action, Park marveled at the methodical preparation that went into creating Sarah's legendary luck. Every possible advantage was anticipated, every potential opportunity prepared for. When the universe provided an opening, the humans were ready to exploit it. Ma'am, he said quietly, the galaxy thinks we win through random chance. Let them think that, Sarah replied. It's an advantage when your enemies believe you're just lucky. They don't prepare for your random victories because they think they can't predict them. But we can't predict them? We can prepare for them. And preparation is the only reliable way to manufacture luck. The mission that followed would be studied by military strategists for decades as a perfect example of how to turn disadvantage into victory through meticulous preparation. The human destroyer Persistence, hopelessly outgunned and outnumbered, approached the heavily defended mining station during the precisely calculated sensor dead zone created by asteroid shadows. Environmental monitoring shows solar flare activity increasing, reported Lieutenant Kim. Peak electromagnetic interference in ... 4 minutes. Perfect timing, Sarah murmured. Chief Rodriguez, are our communication systems hardened against M interference? Triple shielded and ready, Captain. We'll maintain full communication even during peak flare activity. Excellent. Their systems won't be as well protected. When their coordination fails, we'll have a 17-second window. The approach was textbook perfect, not because conditions were ideal, but because the humans had prepared for the specific chaos they were about to encounter. When the solar flare peaked and the enemy's communication systems failed, the Persistence was already in position to exploit the confusion. Gravitational anomaly approaching, Kim reported. The gas giant's tidal forces are affecting local space-time. Enemy sensors are experiencing distortion. All stop, Sarah ordered. Let them lose us in the gravitational noise. The hegemony fleet, suddenly blind and unable to coordinate, began firing randomly into space. Their weapons, designed for precise engagement, were useless against an enemy they couldn't locate. Power conduit failure on the mining station, reported Park with amazement. Their primary defense grid is down for 17 seconds. All weapons, target the shield generators, Sarah commanded. Execute Plan Lucky 7. Plan Lucky 7 was one of 17 contingency plans the humans had prepared, each one designed to exploit a different fortunate circumstance. In this case, the plan called for precise strikes against shield generators during the brief window. When backup power was cycling online, the attack was devastatingly effective. The mining station shields collapsed just as their communication systems came back online, but it was too late. The Persistence had already accomplished its mission and was retreating through a carefully planned escape route that took advantage of ongoing gravitational distortions. Mission accomplished, Park reported, his voice filled with awe. Mining station destroyed, minimal damage to our systems. The enemy is completely confused about how we managed to get lucky, Sarah finished. With a grin, file the after-action report. Another impossible victory through pure chance. But Park was beginning to understand that there had been nothing chance about it. Every lucky break had been anticipated, every opportunity prepared for. The humans hadn't relied on the universe to favor them. They had positioned themselves to benefit when the universe inevitably provided openings. "Captain," he said quietly, "how did you know all those factors would align?" "I didn't," Sarah replied. "But I knew some of them would. Solar flares occur regularly. Gravitational anomalies from gas giants follow predictable patterns. Communication. Systems fail under electromagnetic stress. Power grids have vulnerabilities. I can't predict which opportunities will occur, but I can prepare for all of them." "So you don't actually rely on luck?" "I rely on Murphy's Law," Sarah explained. "Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But here's the thing, when things go wrong for your enemy at the right moment, that's incredibly lucky for you. The trick is being ready when the things go wrong." Park stared at her with dawning comprehension. "You're not trying to make things go right for us. You're positioning us to benefit when things go wrong for them." "Exactly. The universe is chaotic. Systems fail. Plans don't work perfectly. Random events occur constantly. Most species try to eliminate chaos from their tactical planning. We embrace it. But how do you know what will go wrong? Because everything goes wrong eventually. Equipment fails. Communications break down. Environmental conditions change. People make mistakes. The galaxy's advanced civilizations have become so dependent on their perfect systems that they're vulnerable when those systems fail. And we're not. We expect our systems to fail," Sarah replied, "so we build redundancies. We plan for chaos. We prepare for Murphy's Law. When our equipment fails, we have backups. When their equipment fails, we exploit it." As the Persistence returned to human space, Park reflected on what he had learned about his captain's legendary luck. It wasn't supernatural favoritism from the universe. It was the result of obsessive preparation for every conceivable possibility, combined with the tactical flexibility to exploit opportunities as they arose. The galaxy thought humans were lucky. The truth was far more impressive. Humans had learned to manufacture their own luck through preparation, adaptation, and an intimate understanding of chaos theory. They didn't wait for favorable odds. They created them. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Institute of Statistical Analysis, Professor Zixanth was conducting the most intensive study of his career. For 3 months, he had been embedded with human military forces, observing their operations firsthand in an attempt to understand the source of their impossible statistical success. What he had discovered challenged everything he thought he knew about probability, strategy, and the nature of success itself. Personal log, day 92, he dictated to his quantum storage device. "I have now observed 17 human military operations, each one achieving victory despite odds that should have made success mathematically impossible. I am beginning to suspect that my fundamental assumptions about human tactics may be incorrect." He paused, his four-dimensional form shifting through spectrums of confusion and growing enlightenment. The humans do not plan for optimal conditions. Instead, they plan for what they call worst-case scenarios, situations where everything goes wrong simultaneously. They then develop contingencies for each potential failure, creating what they term backup plans for backup plans. The concept was alien to Zixanth's people, who had perfected the art of predictive mathematics. The calculation collective could forecast optimal outcomes with extraordinary precision, then engineer conditions to make those outcomes inevitable. Human planning seemed chaotic by comparison, preparing for failure rather than success. Today's mission briefing was particularly illuminating, he continued. Captain Mitchell spent 4 hours analyzing potential equipment failures, environmental hazards, communication breakdowns, and enemy countermeasures. She prepared specific responses for 37 different failure scenarios, then positioned her forces to exploit any of them. The mission in question had been a rescue operation in hostile territory. The mathematical probability of success had been 0.008%, essentially impossible. Yet the humans had not only succeeded but had made it look easy. The enemy's primary weapon system experienced a cascade failure due to environmental interference. Zixanth recorded. Their backup communication array was disrupted by solar radiation. Their sensor grid was blinded by metallic debris from a destroyed asteroid. Each individual failure was predictable, but their simultaneous occurrence appeared to be pure chance. He paused, processing the implications of what he had observed. However, the humans were prepared for each failure. They had positioned their forces to exploit weapon system failures. They had established alternative communication protocols immune to solar interference. They had timed their approach to coincide with the asteroid debris field. What appeared to be lucky coincidence was actually meticulous preparation. The revelation was staggering. The humans weren't benefiting from impossible luck, they were creating favorable conditions through preparation and positioning. Their statistical anomalies were the result of tactical approaches that the galaxy's mathematical models couldn't account for. I am beginning to understand, Zixanth continued, that human luck is not a supernatural phenomenon. It is a strategic methodology based on chaos theory, redundant planning, and what they call Murphy's Law, the principle that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. The humans had built their entire tactical philosophy around this principle. Instead of trying to prevent things from going wrong, they positioned themselves to benefit when things inevitably went wrong for their enemies. Captain Mitchell explained their approach using a human metaphor, Zixanth recorded. "We don't try to control the weather," she said. "We just carry umbrellas and rain gear, then hope our enemies don't. When environmental conditions change, they are prepared. When their enemies are not, they exploit the advantage." The more Zixanth studied human tactics, the more he realized how sophisticated their apparent chaos actually was. They didn't rely on optimal conditions. They created optimal outcomes from chaotic conditions. Their redundancy systems are particularly impressive, he noted. Every critical system has at least 2 backups. Every plan has alternative versions for different scenarios. Every piece of equipment has manual overrides. When primary systems fail, as they inevitably do, humans continue operating while their enemies struggle with unexpected problems. But the most remarkable aspect of human tactical thinking was their attitude toward failure itself. Humans expect failure, Zixanth observed. They plan for it, prepare for it, and treat it as a natural part of any complex operation. When failures occur, they are not surprised or paralyzed. They simply implement the appropriate contingency, plan, and continue toward their objective. The contrast with galactic military doctrine was stark. Other species planned for success and were devastated when their perfect plans encountered unexpected complications. Humans planned for chaos and thrived when complexity exceeded their enemies' ability to adapt. I believe I have identified the source of human luck, Zixanth concluded. They do not possess supernatural favoritism from the universe. They have developed a strategic methodology that assumes constant failure and positions them to exploit failure when it occurs to their enemies rather than themselves. The implications were revolutionary. If human tactical approaches could be understood and replicated, other species might be able to achieve similar, impossible victories. The key was learning to think like humans, to embrace chaos rather than fight it, to prepare for failure rather than plan for success. I am requesting permission to extend my embedded observation period, Zixanth added. I believe human tactical methodology represents a fundamental advancement in strategic thinking that could revolutionize galactic military doctrine. We have much to learn from these lucky primitives. As he completed his log entry, Zixanth reflected on how much his understanding had changed. 3 months ago, he had dismissed human success as inexplicable luck. Now he recognized it as sophisticated strategic thinking disguised as chaos. The humans weren't lucky. They were brilliant. The breakthrough in understanding human tactical methodology came during the Battle of Vega Station, where Zixanth witnessed the full scope of human preparation in action. The scenario seemed hopeless. A critical communications relay under siege by overwhelming enemy forces, with human reinforcements arriving too late to prevent its destruction through conventional tactics. "Professor," Captain Mitchell said as she reviewed the tactical situation, "you've been studying our methods for months. Would you like to participate in the planning process?" Zixanth's form brightened with interest. "You would trust me with operational planning?" "You're about to learn the difference between predicting luck and making it," Sarah replied. "Tell me, what does your mathematical analysis suggest about our probability of success?" Zixanth quickly processed the tactical data through his probability matrices. "Given the enemy's superior numbers, defensive positioning, and time constraints, I calculate a 0.003% probability of successful mission completion. The mathematical recommendation would be to abort and minimize losses." "And what would happen?" "If we followed that recommendation, Vega Station would fall, disrupting communications across 3 sectors and potentially allowing enemy forces to—" Zixanth stopped as the implications hit him. "The mathematical approach ensures failure by avoiding risk." "Exactly. Now, let's try the human approach. Instead of calculating optimal success conditions, let's identify everything that could go wrong for the enemy." Sarah activated a holographic display showing Vega Station and its surrounding space. Environmental factors first. Solar activity, gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic interference patterns. What natural phenomena could disrupt enemy operations? The nearby pulsar creates electromagnetic pulses every 47 minutes. Zixanth observed, his analytical mind engaging with this new approach. These pulses could interfere with their sensor networks. Good. What else? The station's orbit takes it through a debris field composed of metallic asteroids. These could create sensor shadows and communication dead zones. Excellent. Now, technical vulnerabilities. What systems might fail under stress? Zixanth found himself thinking in ways his species had never taught him. Instead of calculating optimal outcomes, he was identifying potential failure points and chaos factors. Their power grid relies on quantum tunneling effects that are sensitive to gravitational fluctuations. The station's proximity to the gas giant creates tidal stresses that could cause cascade failures. Very good. Now, psychological factors. How might enemy commanders react to unexpected complications? They would likely follow standard protocols, Zixanth realized. Their responses would be predictable because they rely on mathematical optimization rather than adaptive thinking. And if multiple systems failed simultaneously, they would prioritize repairs according to tactical analysis algorithms, leaving certain vulnerabilities temporarily exposed while they address others. Sarah nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like a human. We can't control what fails or when it fails, but we can position ourselves to exploit failures when they occur. The universe provides chaos, we provide preparation. The battle plan that emerged was unlike anything in Zixanth's experience. Instead of a single optimized strategy, the humans developed 17 different attack scenarios, each one designed to exploit a different combination of potential failures. Scenario 7 assumes their primary sensor array fails during electromagnetic pulse interference, Sarah explained. Scenario 12 exploits communication breakdown during debris field transit. Scenario 15 takes advantage of power grid failures during gravitational stress peaks. But how do you know which scenario will be needed? We don't. That's why we prepare for all of them. When the universe hands us our opportunity, we'll be ready to take it. The battle began with the humans positioning their forces throughout the system, not in optimal attack formations but in positions that would allow them to exploit any of their prepared scenarios. To outside observers, their deployment looked chaotic and inefficient. Zixanth soon learned why. Electromagnetic pulse incoming, reported the sensor operator. Enemy communication systems experiencing interference. Scenario 7 is active. Sarah announced calmly. All units, implement M protocol. Exploit their communication breakdown in 3.2.1. Execute. The human forces moved with practiced precision, each unit knowing exactly what to do when Scenario 7 conditions occurred. They struck at targets that would be vulnerable specifically during communication blackouts, achieving maximum effect while the enemy struggled to coordinate their response. Gravitational stress approaching critical levels came the next report. Station power grid showing instability. Scenario 15 conditions developing, Sarah observed. Prepare to exploit power failures. When the station's defense grid flickered and failed due to quantum tunneling disruption, the humans were already in position to exploit the 17-second vulnerability window. Their attack was perfectly timed because they had prepared for exactly this type of lucky break. Debris field creating sensor shadows, reported Tactical. Enemy tracking systems compromised. Multiple scenario conditions active, Sarah noted. With satisfaction. This is what we call a perfect storm when multiple failures create cascading opportunities. What followed was a masterpiece of adaptive tactics. The humans flowed seamlessly between different prepared scenarios as conditions changed, exploiting each failure and complication that affected their enemies while remaining unaffected themselves, due to their redundant systems and chaos-resistant planning. Incredible, Zixanth observed as the battle unfolded. You're not fighting the chaos, you're dancing with it. That's the human advantage, Sarah replied. Other species try to impose order on chaotic systems. We learn to thrive in chaos itself. The victory was complete and seemingly effortless. To external observers, the humans had once again achieved an impossible victory through incredible luck. Everything had gone right for them at exactly the right moments, but Zixanth now understood the truth. Nothing had gone right. Everything had gone wrong for the enemy, and the humans had been perfectly positioned to exploit each failure as it occurred. This is not luck, he said with dawning comprehension. This is manufactured advantage through preparation for chaos. Now you're getting it, Sarah replied. We don't make our own luck by controlling the universe. We make it by being ready. When the universe provides opportunities. The revelation transformed Zixanth's understanding not just of human tactics, but of strategy itself. He returned to the Galactic Institute with a comprehensive analysis that would revolutionize military thinking across dozens of civilizations. Esteemed colleagues, he announced to the assembled scientists, I have discovered the source of human luck. It is not supernatural favoritism or probability manipulation. It is a sophisticated strategic methodology that I propose we term manufactured serendipity. The chamber buzzed with interest as Zixanth presented his findings. The mathematical models that had failed to explain human success were replaced with new frameworks based on chaos theory, redundant planning, and adaptive response systems. Humans do not plan for optimal conditions, he explained. They plan for optimal responses to suboptimal conditions. When chaos occurs, as it inevitably does, they are prepared to benefit while their enemies struggle to adapt. Dr. Velkaran leaned forward, her crystalline form refracting the light of the holographic displays. You're suggesting that apparent randomness can be strategically exploited? I'm suggesting that randomness is not random to those who prepare for it, Zixanth replied. Humans study chaos patterns, identify failure modes, and position themselves to benefit when predictable unpredictabilities occur. The concept was revolutionary. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had spent millennia perfecting systems that worked optimally under ideal conditions. The humans had perfected systems that worked adequately under any conditions and exceptionally when their enemy systems failed. This has profound implications for military doctrine, observed Commander Thexmol. If random factors can be strategically exploited, our entire approach to tactical planning may be fundamentally flawed. Indeed, Zixanth agreed. We have been trying to eliminate variables from our calculations. The humans embrace variables as tactical opportunities. The presentation continued for hours, with Zixanth detailing the human approaches he had observed. Murphy's Law as a tactical principle, redundant systems as insurance against chaos, contingency planning as a form of strategic preparation, adaptive thinking as a response to changing conditions. Perhaps most importantly, he concluded, humans have developed what they call a prepared mind, a cognitive approach that recognizes opportunities as they arise rather than trying to create ideal conditions. Professor Klicksven raised a fundamental question that had been troubling many of the assembled scientists. Can these methods be taught to species that have evolved beyond chaos tolerance? Our civilizations have spent millennia developing systems that eliminate randomness from our decision-making processes. An excellent question, Zixanth replied. I believe the answer lies in understanding that chaos elimination and chaos exploitation are not mutually exclusive. We can maintain our sophisticated systems while developing human-style contingency thinking. The debate that followed was intense and far-reaching. The galaxy's mathematical minds grappled with concepts that challenged their fundamental assumptions about strategy, planning, and the nature of success itself. We need practical applications, declared Dr. Velkaran. If human methodology is superior, we must learn to implement it ourselves. Agreed, Zixanth responded. I propose establishing a joint program with human military advisors. We need to learn how to think like luck makers rather than probability calculators. The proposal was approved unanimously. For the first time in galactic history, advanced civilizations would be learning strategic thinking from a species they had previously dismissed as primitively fortunate. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The galaxy's most sophisticated mathematical minds were about to discover that the key to consistent success lay not in perfecting their calculations, but in preparing for their calculations to be wrong. The training program that emerged from the Galactic Institute's partnership with human military advisors was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered to learn what humans had always taken for granted: how to thrive in chaos rather than be paralyzed by it. Captain Mitchell found herself in the unprecedented position of teaching strategic thinking to beings whose mathematical capabilities far exceeded human comprehension. The challenge was not conveying information, but fundamentally altering how advanced minds approached problems. Today we're going to practice Murphy's Law planning, she announced to a classroom filled with the galaxy's most brilliant military strategists. Who can tell me what Murphy's Law states? Dr. Velkaran's crystalline form brightened. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. Close, but not quite complete, Sarah replied. Murphy's Law states that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong at the worst possible time in the worst possible way and with the worst possible consequences. The alien officers exchanged glances. The concept seemed needlessly pessimistic to species that had learned to engineer optimal outcomes. The human corollary to Murphy's Law, Sarah continued, is that if something can go wrong for your enemy at the right time, that's incredibly lucky for you. The key is being ready when the things go wrong. She activated a holographic tactical scenario, a simple convoy escort mission with apparently straightforward objectives. Standard approach. Calculate optimal route. Deploy forces for maximum efficiency. Execute plan according to specifications. What's wrong with this methodology? Commander Clixanth of the Prediction Corps answered confidently. Nothing. Mathematical optimization produces the highest probability of success. Under ideal conditions, Sarah agreed. But conditions are never ideal. Zixanth, you've studied our methods. What would humans do differently? Zixanth's form shifted through spectrums of growing understanding. Humans would identify everything that could go wrong and prepare responses for each failure mode. Exactly. Let's practice. What could go wrong with this convoy escort? The alien officers, trained to think in terms of optimal solutions, struggled with the concept of systematically anticipating failures. But gradually, they began to identify potential problems. Equipment failures could disable escort vessels, suggested one officer. Environmental factors could force route changes, added another. Enemy forces could employ unexpected tactics, observed a third. Good, Sarah encouraged. Now, instead of trying to prevent these problems, let's prepare to exploit them. If our equipment fails, how do we benefit? If the environment changes, how do we adapt? If the enemy surprises us, how do we surprise them back? The exercise that followed was revolutionary for the alien officers. Instead of planning for perfect execution, they learned to plan for imperfect adaptation. Instead of optimizing for ideal conditions, they optimized for response flexibility. This is liberating, observed Dr. Valkaran as the exercise progressed. We have spent millennia trying to eliminate uncertainty from our planning. The human approach embraces uncertainty as a tactical resource. That's exactly right, Sarah replied. Uncertainty isn't your enemy, it's your opportunity. The universe is chaotic by nature. You can either fight that chaos or learn to use it. The training scenarios grew progressively more complex. The alien officers learned to develop contingency plans for their contingency plans, to build redundancy into every system, and most importantly, to maintain what humans called situational awareness, the ability to recognize and exploit opportunities as they arose. The key insight, Zixanth explained to his fellow scientists during a progress review, is that humans don't try to control outcomes. They control their responses to outcomes. This gives them tactical flexibility that our optimization-based approaches cannot match. The results were immediate and dramatic. Alien officers who had been trained in human methodology began achieving victories that their mathematical models indicated should be impossible. They weren't becoming luckier. They were becoming more prepared to exploit luck when it occurred. It's remarkable, reported Commander Thexmal after completing the program. I no longer fear equipment failures or environmental complications. I anticipate them and position my forces to benefit when they occur to the enemy instead of us. The most significant breakthrough came during a joint exercise between human and alien forces facing a simulated enemy that employed conventional optimal strategy approaches. The results were devastating for the conventional forces. They never had a chance, observed Sarah as she reviewed the exercise results with her alien students. They planned for optimal conditions and were paralyzed when conditions became chaotic. Meanwhile, you were prepared for chaos and thrived in it. But how did we know which preparations would be needed? Asked Dr. Velkaran. You didn't, Sarah replied. That's the point. You prepared for all possible contingencies, then implemented the appropriate responses as conditions changed. You didn't predict the future, you prepared for multiple possible futures. The philosophical implications were staggering. The galaxies. Most advanced civilizations were learning that true intelligence lay not in perfecting their predictions, but in preparing for their predictions to be wrong. We have been approaching strategy as a mathematical problem with optimal solutions, reflected Professor Klicksvan during a seminar discussion. The humans approach it as a dynamic process with adaptive responses. And their approach is more effective, added Zixanth, because the universe is not a mathematical problem to be solved, but a dynamic system to be navigated. The transformation spread throughout galactic military doctrine with unprecedented speed. Species that had relied on mathematical optimization for millennia began incorporating human-style chaos planning into their strategic thinking. The results were remarkable. Not only were they achieving more consistent victories, but they were finding those victories more sustainable because they had prepared for post-victory complications as well. The humans have given us something more valuable than advanced technology, observed Admiral Verkesh of the Strategic Command. They have given us a new way of thinking about problems themselves. The ultimate test of the new doctrine came when the galaxy faced its greatest crisis in recorded history. The entropy swarm, a force of pure chaos that consumed order itself, emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies. Their very presence caused mathematical constants to fluctuate, probability distributions to collapse, and predictive models to fail catastrophically. For the galaxy's traditionally mathematical civilizations, the entropy swarm represented an existential nightmare. Their advanced systems, dependent on stable physical laws and predictable outcomes, began failing immediately upon contact with the chaos-generating entities. Emergency session of the Strategic Council, announced Admiral Verkesh as reports flooded in from the frontier. The entropy swarm has consumed 17 star systems. Our conventional forces are ineffective. Mathematical models cannot predict their behavior because they alter the mathematical constants upon which models depend. The assembled commanders, representatives from the galaxy's most advanced military minds, struggled with an enemy that invalidated their fundamental approach to warfare. How do we fight an enemy that makes our weapons unpredictable? Asked Dr. Velkaran, her crystalline form flickering with distress. How do we plan tactics against forces that change the laws of physics? In their vicinity? We don't, Captain Mitchell replied quietly. We adapt. All eyes turned to the human representative, whose species had once been dismissed as randomly fortunate, but was now recognized as possessing sophisticated, strategic thinking. Captain Mitchell, Admiral Verkesh addressed her formally. You've studied chaos-based warfare longer than any of us. How do we combat an enemy that weaponizes unpredictability itself? Sarah activated a holographic display showing the entropy swarm's advance pattern. To most observers, their movements appeared completely random. But her human-trained eyes saw something different. They're not actually random, she observed. They're chaotic, which is different. Chaos has patterns. They're just patterns that our conventional analysis can't detect because we're looking for mathematical regularity instead of dynamic flow. Explain, requested Zixanth, his analytical mind engaging with the problem. Chaos theory teaches us that apparently random systems often have underlying structures. The entropy swarm isn't creating pure randomness. They're creating complex chaos. And chaos can be anticipated if you understand its patterns. Sarah manipulated the display, highlighting subtle trends in the swarm's seemingly random behavior. They consume ordered systems first, then move to progressively more complex targets. They avoid areas of natural chaos because they can't enhance what's already chaotic. And most importantly, they're vulnerable during the brief moments when they transition between order-consuming and chaos-generating phases. How do we exploit these vulnerabilities? Asked Commander Thexmol. By becoming more chaotic than they are, Sarah replied. We can't fight them with orderly tactics because they consume order. But we can fight them with adaptive chaos-controlled unpredictability that changes faster than they can consume it. The strategy that emerged was pure human thinking applied on a galactic scale. Instead of deploying forces in orderly formations that the entropy swarm could consume, the Allied fleets would operate in constantly shifting, apparently random patterns that were actually coordinated chaos. Every ship will operate independently according to chaos protocols, Sarah explained during the fleet briefing. No fixed formations, no predictable patterns, no ordered communications. Each vessel will respond to local conditions using human style. Adaptive thinking. But how will we coordinate without communication? Asked Dr. Valkaran. Through prepared contingencies and situational awareness, Sarah replied. You've all been trained in human methodology. Trust your chaos training. When you see an opportunity, exploit it. When conditions change, adapt. When order fails, embrace disorder. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic military history. Allied forces moved in patterns that appeared completely chaotic to outside observers but were actually highly coordinated applications of human chaos theory. Ships would suddenly change course, regroup in unexpected formations, and attack from directions that defied tactical logic. The entropy swarm, expecting to face orderly opposition that they could systematically consume, instead encountered an enemy that was already chaotic. Their order-consuming abilities were useless against forces that operated according to adaptive disorder. They can't consume our chaos because we're generating it faster than they can process it, reported one ship captain during the battle. Every time they adapt to our pattern, we change to a new one. But the real breakthrough came when the Allied forces began exploiting the swarm's own transitions between consumption and generation phases. Entropy spike detected, announced Zixanth, who had become remarkably skilled at chaos pattern recognition. The swarm is shifting from consumption to generation mode. Vulnerability window opening in 3.2.1. All units, execute Murphy's Law Protocol 17, Sarah commanded. Exploit their transition vulnerability. The attack was perfectly timed and completely chaotic. Allied ships struck from 17 different directions using tactics that had no mathematical basis, but were perfectly adapted to exploit the specific vulnerability that emerged during the swarm's phase transition. The result was devastating for the entropy swarm. Their organized chaos generation system was disrupted by attacks that were more chaotic than their own defenses. For the first time in their existence, they encountered an enemy that could out-chaos them. Incredible, observed Admiral Verkesh as the swarm began to retreat. We're defeating a force of pure entropy by being more adaptively chaotic than they are. That's the human advantage, Sarah replied. We don't try to impose order on chaos. We learn to thrive in chaos itself. And sometimes, the most chaotic thing you can do is be prepared for anything. The victory marked a fundamental shift in galactic strategic thinking. The universe's most advanced civilizations had learned that their greatest strength lay not in their sophisticated systems, but in their ability to adapt when those systems failed. The humans have taught us the most important lesson of all, reflected Zixanth during the post-battle analysis. True intelligence is not about having the right answer. It's about being able to find the right answer when your original answer turns out to be wrong. The transformation of galactic civilization was complete, but its implications extended far beyond military applications. The chaos adaptation principles that humans had taught were revolutionizing every aspect of advanced society. We have fundamentally changed how we approach problems, announced Dr. Velkaran during a scientific symposium held 1 year after the entropy swarm's defeat. Instead of seeking perfect solutions, we now design adaptive solutions that improve as conditions change. The shift was profound. Universities began teaching chaos resilience alongside traditional mathematics. Engineering schools emphasized redundant systems and failure adaptation. Research institutes studied beneficial randomness as a legitimate scientific principle. The humans showed us that advancement doesn't mean eliminating uncertainty, observed Professor Klicksvin during a cultural exchange program. It means becoming so good at handling uncertainty that it becomes an advantage rather than a weakness. The economic implications were equally significant. Industries that had focused on optimizing perfect conditions began developing products that performed well under any conditions. The market for chaos-resistant technologies exploded as civilizations learned to value reliability over optimization. It's remarkable, noted economic analyst Veltrix of the Galactic Trade Commission. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy are now competing to create the most adaptively chaotic systems. We've learned that flexibility is more valuable than perfection. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy's understanding of luck, success, and intelligence itself had been fundamentally altered by exposure to human thinking. We used to believe that luck was random chance that favored the undeserving, reflected Zixanth during a philosophical discussion with Captain Mitchell. Now we understand that luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity, and that the luckiest beings are those who prepare for the most opportunities. You've learned to make your own luck, Sarah agreed. That's the real human secret. We don't get lucky by accident, we get lucky by design. The training programs that had started as military exercises expanded into comprehensive educational curricula. Children across the galaxy learned human thinking alongside traditional subjects. The concepts of Murphy's Law, contingency planning, and adaptive response became as fundamental as mathematics and physics. We're raising a generation that thinks like humans, observed Education Minister Hax Mora of the Academic Council. Not because we want them to be human, but because we want them to be prepared for anything the universe might throw at them. The cultural exchange programs that followed were unprecedented in their scope and impact. Human advisors worked with alien psychologists to understand how different species could develop adaptive thinking. Alien researchers studied human problem-solving methods, learning to approach challenges with a chaos adaptation mentality rather than an optimization framework. The most important insight, noted cultural anthropologist Kex Vara during a joint research project, is that human luck represents a completely different relationship with uncertainty. Instead of fearing the unknown, they prepare for it. Instead of avoiding chaos, they learn to navigate it. The technological developments that emerged from this collaboration were revolutionary. Systems that combined alien sophistication with human adaptability. Starships that used both mathematical optimization and chaos protocols. Communication networks that employed predictive algorithms alongside adaptive redundancies. We're creating hybrid technologies, explained Chief Engineer Veltox of the Galactic Development Council. Systems that are both advanced and lucky sophisticated. Enough to work optimally, adaptable enough to work always. The military implications continued to evolve. The Galactic Defense Force was restructured around principles of adaptive chaos rather than mathematical optimization. Elite units were trained in both alien calculation and human improvisation. Command structures were designed to function with both predictive planning and Murphy's Law contingencies. "The new doctrine is elegantly simple," explained Admiral Verkesh during a strategic review. "Plan for success, prepare for failure, and position yourself to benefit when your enemy's plans encounter chaos." The philosophical impact on galactic civilization was perhaps the most profound change of all. Species that had spent millennia perfecting predictive systems were learning to appreciate the value of unpredictable responses. The concept of controlled chaos became a fundamental principle of advanced thinking.